This wasn't a war. It wasn't a disease. It wasn't famine. It was one animal. A single Bengal tigress that, over the course of 7 years, killed 436 people across Nepal and India. To put that in perspective, the most famous man-eater in the ocean, the Jersey Shore shark of 1916, killed 4 people. The notorious lions of Tsavo, who halted the British Empire's railway project in Africa, are estimated to have taken 35. The Champawat Tiger killed 436. She is, by a massive margin, the deadliest individual predator in recorded history. Entire villages emptied. Ancient trade routes were reclaimed by the jungle. Forests turned into dead zones where no one dared to walk, because to walk there was to feel eyes on your back that you could never see. But this isn't just a monster story. It's a story about a predator that learned to exploit the one thing humans rely on for survival: our routine. And by the end of this, you'll see the tragic truth that the most terrifying thing in this story wasn't the tiger. It was the moment we created her. It started in the late 1890s in the Rupal region of Nepal. At first, it was just the quiet vanishings. A woodcutter wouldn't return for dinner. A woman gathering fodder would leave a half-filled basket in the grass. But she was nowhere to be found. No struggle. No scream. Just a chilling, heavy silence. But then, the quiet vanished, and the horror became loud. The tigress stopped waiting for us in the forest. She realized we were easy. She began stalking the edges of the villages, watching from the high grass as children played. She learned our schedules. She learned when the men were in the fields and when the elderly were alone. The deaths became gruesome. Villagers began finding remnants. A single shoe left in a trail of matted grass, or a blood-soaked sari tangled in a thorn bush. She wasn't just killing for hunger anymore. She was hunting with a terrifying efficiency. People were being snatched from their doorsteps while their families were in the next room. They would hear a sudden thud, a muffled gasp, and by the time they reached the door, there was nothing but a smear of red leading into the blackness of the trees. The terror was so absolute that it paralyzed the region. Mothers stopped letting their children step off the porch. Men refused to go to the fields. The harvest rotted in the sun because to step outside was to offer yourself to the ghost in the grass. By the time her tally hit 200, the Nepalese government realized they weren't dealing with a normal animal. This wasn't a tiger. It was a national emergency. They did something never before seen in the history of wildlife. They sent in the army. Thousands of soldiers flooded the Rupal district, but they weren't hunters. They were infantry. They marched through the jungle in lines, beating brass drums, blowing horns, and firing volleys of lead into the brush, hoping to scare the demon away. But here was the fatal mistake. They didn't have the skills to track her, so they settled for evicting her. Through sheer, overwhelming noise and fire, they forced her toward the border. They drove her across the Sarda River and into the Kumaon district of India. The soldiers cheered as she swam across the water. They thought they had won. What they had actually done was unleash a monster. She arrived in Kumaon with a broken mind and a starving belly. She was an expert in the taste of human flesh. She was educated in the ways of our shadows, and, most terrifying of all, she was now completely devoid of fear. The people of India had no idea that a ghost with 200 kills was currently stepping onto their shores, looking for its next meal. In India, the nightmare reached its peak. She realized that humans are soft. We have no claws, no night vision, and we are incredibly predictable. She began farming villages. There are accounts of her leaping through thatched roofs while families sat at dinner. Imagine the silence of a rural mountain home, and suddenly, 500 pounds of muscle and fur crashes through the ceiling. No growl, no warning. Just the sound of snapping wood and the person sitting next to you being gone before the dust even settles. The Kumaon fell into a total blockade. Markets that had been loud for centuries went silent. You could walk for miles and not see a single plume of smoke from a cooking fire because people were too terrified to go out for wood. If you had to travel, you went in groups of 20, beating drums, and even then, she was known to leap into the center of the line, pick a victim, and vanish into the grass before a single rifle could be leveled. She wasn't just killing for food anymore. She was holding an entire region hostage. In 1907, the authorities turned to Jim Corbett. He arrived in the village of Champawat just as the tigress had claimed her 436th victim, a 16-year-old girl. Corbett decided to do what no one else would. He followed the blood. He tracked her through a theater of horror. He found bits of the girl's clothing snagged on thorns, a necklace, and then, in a small clearing, he found the remains. Corbett noted that the tigress hadn't even bothered to hide the body. She had left it in the open, as if she knew no one was brave enough to come for it. As he sat there in the oppressive silence, Corbett realized the birds had gone silent. The monkeys weren't chattering. The jungle was holding its breath. He turned around, and that's when he saw the grass move. Not from the wind, from something heavy, something low. She had been tracking him the entire time. The final confrontation was a desperate gamble. Corbett organized a massive beat with 300 villagers to flush her out of a deep gully. As she broke cover, the tigress didn't flee. She charged. Corbett fired his first rifle, then his second. Both hit. But a Bengal tigress at full charge is 500 pounds of momentum and rage. With his last bullet, and the tigress only feet away, he fired a third time. The silence that followed was the first time the Kumaon had breathed in years. When it was over, Corbett approached the body. He looked at the paws that had taken 436 lives. But then, he opened her mouth. He saw it immediately. Her upper and lower canine teeth on the right side were shattered, the result of an old gunshot wound from a hunter years prior. This is the why. This injury meant she could no longer hunt her natural prey. She couldn't kill a deer or a boar. She was starving in a jungle full of food she couldn't catch. So, she turned to the only thing slow enough for her to kill: us. We injured her. We broke her tools of survival, and in doing so, we created the most prolific killer in history. The Champawat tiger wasn't born a monster. She was a tragedy of our own making. A haunting reminder that when we strike at the wild and fail to finish the job, the wild strikes back with a vengeance we can't even imagine. If you want to understand how the world we live in was shaped, one decision at a time, subscribe to Infinite Turning Points.